Penelope walked into the clinic expecting a simple checkup. What she didn't expect was to find the man who shattered her heart, the same one who abandoned her days before their wedding. Now he was her doctor, and his touch on her skin burned like a fire she thought she had extinguished. When his fingers brushed against hers while checking her blood pressure, a shiver ran through her entire body. The question hung in the hot air between them. Could a love that ended in betrayal be reborn in forgiveness? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member for early access to upcoming stories. And if you truly felt it was worth hearing, click the super thanks button too. Your support makes all the difference and helps us continue bringing stories that move you. The exam room door opened with a soft click, but to Penelope, the sound echoed like distant thunder announcing a storm. The air conditioner hummed quietly, mingling with the antiseptic smell of alcohol and the disposable paper covering the examination table where she sat. Her hands were sweating against the thin fabric of the light blue hospital gown she wore, the kind of clothing that makes you feel exposed even when covered. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervousness she always felt in medical clinics. It was just a routine checkup. No big deal. Nothing that could spiral out of control. But when her eyes met the man who walked through the door, the world seemed to collapse in slow motion. Nicholas. The white coat contrasted with his tanned skin, and the stethoscope hanging around his neck swung slightly as he walked. His brown hair was shorter, more tamed than she remembered, and there was a new maturity in his face, fine lines around his eyes that didn't exist 5 years ago. But they were the same eyes. Those greenish-brown eyes that once looked at her with absolute love, that promised eternity on summer nights under the stars, that sparkled when he knelt down with a ring in his hand. The same eyes that abandoned her 3 days before the wedding. Time froze. Penelope felt the blood drain from her face, and for a terrible moment she thought she might faint. Her heart raced, not from medical anxiety, but from pure, visceral shock. She gripped the edge of the table tightly, her knuckles turning white. Nicholas stopped midway. The clipboard he was holding slipped slightly in his hand, and Penelope saw the exact moment he recognized her. His eyes widened, his jaw tensed, and something crossed his face. Surprise, regret, desire. She couldn't decipher it. Or perhaps she didn't want to. "Penelope," he said, his voice coming out hoarse, as if he had just woken up, or as if he hadn't pronounced that name in years. She lifted her chin, forcing herself not to show weakness. "Dr. Carter," she corrected with a coldness that cut deeper than she intended. He swallowed hard. She saw his Adam's apple rise and fall, and she hated herself for still noticing these details, hated herself for feeling her heart race not just with anger, but with something dangerously close to longing. "I didn't know you would be my patient today," he said, minimally recovering his professional composure. But there was tension in his shoulders, a stiffness that betrayed his controlled tone. "If you prefer, I can call another doctor to—" "No need." She cut him off, crossing her arms over her chest. "Let's just get this over with." He nodded, but didn't move immediately. For long seconds they just stared at each other, two strangers who once knew every curve and secret of each other's bodies, now separated by an abyss of hurt and lost years. Finally, Nicholas stepped forward, and the room seemed to shrink. The exam room, which moments before had seemed sterile and impersonal, now pulsed with an almost suffocating energy. He pulled the swivel chair and sat in front of her so close that Penelope could smell him, a mixture of masculine soap and something she couldn't name. But that instantly took her back to lazy mornings entangled in sheets, to laughter shared in sunlit kitchens, to stolen kisses in empty elevators. "I need to check your blood pressure," he said, picking up the sphygmomanometer. She extended her left arm, keeping her gaze fixed on the opposite wall, refusing to look at him. But when his fingers touched her skin for the first time in 5 years, just for a second while adjusting the cuff around her arm, it was as if an electric shock ran through her entire body. She held her breath. Nicholas hesitated. His fingers remained on her skin for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and Penelope felt the heat of that touch burning through every nerve ending. She risked a sideways glance and saw that he was affected too. His jaw was tense, his lips pressed into a thin line, as if he were fighting against something that threatened to overflow. "You're nervous," he observed quietly, pumping the cuff. "Your blood pressure is a bit elevated." "Maybe it's because of the doctor," she retorted, and the hint of sarcasm in her voice was intentional. A muscle pulsed in his jaw, but he didn't respond. He just carefully released the cuff and wrote something on the clipboard, his movements mechanical as if on autopilot. "I need to listen to your heart," he said after a moment, picking up the stethoscope. Penelope felt panic rise. Having that man so close, listening to the accelerated beats of a heart he himself had broken, seemed like a cruelty of fate. But she wouldn't back down. She wouldn't show that it affected her. She opened the gown slightly, exposing the skin over her heart. Nicholas put the stethoscope in his ears and, with a gentleness that surprised her, positioned the cold membrane over her chest. Her breathing faltered. He was so close that she could see the golden flecks in his brown eyes, could count each eyelash, could feel the heat emanating from his body. His scent enveloped her, and suddenly she was back to that night, the last good night before everything crumbled, when he held her in his arms and whispered promises he would never keep. "Take a deep breath," he asked, his voice lower now, almost intimate. She obeyed, her chest rising and falling slowly. But as she inhaled, she felt his fingers adjust the stethoscope, and the touch, even through the cold metal, was like fire against her skin. Nicholas closed his eyes for a second, as if concentrating, or perhaps trying to control himself. When he opened them again, they met with hers, and there, in that silence loaded with things unsaid, they both understood. Time had erased nothing. "Your heart is racing," he murmured, and there was something dangerous in his voice. Something that wasn't just clinical. "I know," Penelope replied, and her tone was heavy with double meaning. They remained like this, eyes locked, breaths intertwined, the world outside ceasing to exist. There was no more exam room, no more lost years, no more hurt. There were just the two of them and the still pulsing desire between their bodies. Nicholas removed the stethoscope slowly, but his fingers lingered on her skin for a moment longer. A moment that promised everything and nothing at the same time, and then, as if waking from a trance, he backed away. "Everything is normal," he said, but his voice trembled. "Physically, you're healthy." "Physically," she thought bitterly, "because emotionally I never recovered from you." But before she could respond, Nicholas abruptly stood up. "I'll need you to do some blood tests. The receptionist will schedule them." He avoided her gaze, focusing on scribbling something on the clipboard with unnecessary intensity. Penelope got down from the table, adjusting her gown. "Is that all?" He finally looked at her, and what she saw in those eyes almost knocked her down. Regret, desire, pain. "For now," he answered softly, and Penelope didn't know if he was talking about the medical examination or about them. Penelope left the exam room with shaky legs, and her heart still beating irregularly. The clinic hallway seemed endless, the fluorescent lights above humming softly as she walked toward reception. Each step echoed on the white linoleum floor, and she felt as if all eyes were on her, although rationally, she knew no one there had the slightest idea of the emotional storm that had just devastated her in that room. She stopped at the reception counter, her hands still trembling slightly as she handed over the test requisition Nicholas had filled out. The attendant, a middle-aged woman with red-framed glasses, smiled politely and began typing on the computer. "The blood tests can be done today if you have time," she said, without taking her eyes off the screen, "or we can schedule for another day." Penelope opened her mouth to respond, but before she could form the words, she felt a presence behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Her entire body reacted instinctively. Her skin prickled, her breath caught in her throat, and heat rose up her neck. "Miss Torres," Nicholas's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "You forgot this." She turned slowly, and there he was, holding her bag, a brown leather purse she had left hanging on the chair in the exam room. His long fingers held the strap carefully, as if it were something fragile, and when their eyes met again, Penelope saw something different there. It wasn't just professionalism. There was an intensity, a contained hunger that made her stomach flip. "Thank you," she said, extending her hand. But when her fingers brushed his as she took the bag, it was as if time stopped again. The touch was brief, milliseconds, but enough to send a wave of heat through her entire body. She saw his pupils dilate, saw the way he swallowed hard, saw the tension travel across his broad shoulders under the white coat. He didn't release the bag immediately. Neither did she. They stood there, fingers intertwined through the leather of the strap, gazes locked on each other as if tied by invisible threads. The world around them disappeared. There was no more receptionist, no more waiting patients, no more walls. There were only the two of them and the 5-year abyss that opened between their bodies. "Penelope," he whispered, so quietly that only she could hear. And the way he pronounced her name, no longer Miss Torres, no longer with medical formality, but with that painful familiarity, made something inside her break. "No," she cut him off, pulling the bag harder than she intended. "Don't do that." He blinked, confused. "Do what?" "Say my name like that." Her voice came out shakier than she would have liked. "As if you still had the right." His jaw tensed, and for a moment Penelope thought he might argue. But then he just nodded, stepping back. "You're right, I'm sorry." He shoved his hands into his lab coat pockets as if he didn't know what to do with them. That was inappropriate. It was, she agreed, although every cell in her body screamed otherwise. A heavy silence fell between them. The receptionist had stopped typing and was discreetly watching the two, clearly sensing the tension saturating the air. Other patients in the waiting room also began to notice, low whispers, curious glances. Nicholas noticed. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his professional composure. "About the tests, I'll schedule for another day," Penelope interrupted, turning to the receptionist. "Can it be next week?" The woman nodded quickly, clearly relieved to have something concrete to do. "Of course, which day do you prefer?" But before Penelope could respond, Nicholas spoke. "Actually, it would be better to do it today. Some of the markers I'm checking are time-sensitive." He looked directly at her, and there was an unspoken plea in his eyes. It won't take more than 15 minutes. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to leave that clinic, get in her car, and never come back. She wanted to be away from him, away from those eyes that still made her feel things she had sworn she'd buried. But there was something in his voice, genuine concern mixed with something deeper, that made her hesitate. "Fine," she gave in, hating herself for it. "Today." Nicholas let out an almost imperceptible sigh of relief. "Thank you. The nurse will call you in a few minutes." He started to walk away, but then stopped, turning partially. "Penelope." She looked up, and what she saw in that face almost broke her. Pure, raw, devastating regret. "It's good to see you," he said softly. "Even like this. Even this way." Before she could process these words, before she could decide whether to respond with anger or with the dangerous truth that it was also good to see him, he had already disappeared down the hallway. 20 minutes later, Penelope was sitting in the small collection room, her arm extended on the padded counter, while the nurse prepared the needles and test tubes. The tight tourniquet around her bicep made her arm throb, but it was a welcome pain, something physical, concrete, that distracted her from the emotional whirlwind threatening to consume her. "You'll feel a little sting," the nurse warned with a gentle smile. Penelope just nodded, looking away at the opposite wall. But it wasn't the wall she saw. It was Nicholas's face. It was those eyes that haunted her, that voice that echoed in her mind, that fleeting touch that still burned her skin. "It's good to see you." What right did he have to say that? What right did he have to look at her that way, as if the 5 years hadn't existed, as if he hadn't destroyed her, as if there was still something between them besides ashes and resentment? But the scarier truth, the one she didn't want to admit even to herself, was that there was something beyond ashes. There were embers. Embers she thought extinct, but which just one look from him had reignited. "All done," the nurse announced, pressing a cotton ball over the small hole in her arm. "Hold this for a few minutes." Penelope obeyed, applying pressure while the nurse labeled the tubes with her blood. Blood that Nicholas would analyze. Blood that carried the truth her racing heart had already confessed. She hadn't gotten over that man. She got up to leave, but as she opened the door, she almost collided with someone in the hallway. Nicholas, Of course it was him. "Sorry," he said quickly, taking a step back. But he didn't go far enough. The hallway was narrow and they were too close, so close that Penelope could see the darker shade of green around his brown irises, could see the slight shadow of beard beginning to appear on his jawline, could see the way he looked at her lips before forcing his gaze back to her eyes. "Are you following me, Doctor?" She raised an eyebrow, trying to sound casual, failing miserably. "No," he replied, but a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My next patient is in this room." He gestured to the door next to them. "But—" He hesitated, as if waging an internal war. "Can I ask you a question?" She crossed her arms defensively. "Depends on the question. Are you okay?" He searched for the right words. "I mean, in your life. Are you happy?" The question caught her completely off guard. Of all the things he could ask, that was the last thing she expected. And the most dangerous. "Why do you care?" she shot back, her voice coming out harsher than she intended. Something passed across his face, pain perhaps, or remorse. "Because I never stopped caring." The air left her lungs as if she'd been punched. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "What do you say to that? How do you respond to a confession that comes 5 years too late?" Nicholas took another step toward her, invading even more of the space between them. "I know I have no right to ask. I know I ruined everything. But—" He stopped as if the next words were too heavy to come out. "Do you hate me?" Penelope should have said yes, should have spat the word with all the anger she'd accumulated during sleepless nights, during shed tears, during the humiliation of explaining to guests that the wedding was cancelled. Should have made him feel at least a fraction of the pain she carried alone. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was the truth. "I wanted to hate you," she whispered, and her own words surprised her. "God knows I tried, but no, I can't." His eyes widened, and she saw something light up there. Hope, perhaps. Something dangerous and tempting. He extended his hand slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. His fingers brushed her arm, moving slowly until finding her hand. The touch was light, hesitant, but when their fingers intertwined, it was as if an electric current ran through both their bodies. "Penelope," his voice was hoarse, laden with emotion. Can we talk for real? Not here, not like this, but somewhere where we can—" "Dr. Carter." A nurse's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Your patient is waiting." Nicholas closed his eyes for a second, clearly frustrated. But when he opened them again, there was determination there. "Meet me," he asked, still holding her hand. "Please, just one conversation. That's all I'm asking for." Penelope knew she should refuse, knew that conversation would only reopen wounds that had barely healed. But when she looked into his eyes and saw the raw, desperate plea, something inside her gave way. "Where?" she asked, and immediately regretted it. But it was too late to turn back. The cafe was 3 blocks from the clinic, a small, cozy place that Penelope recognized immediately. It was the same cafe where they used to meet years ago, where Nicholas always ordered cappuccino with extra cinnamon, and she had green tea with honey. The same place where he asked her to be his girlfriend on a rainy autumn afternoon, where they planned their future together on scribbled napkins, where they laughed until they couldn't breathe about things they now couldn't even remember. Coming back here was like stepping through a portal to the past. Penelope pushed the glass door, and the small bell above it tinkled softly, announcing her arrival. The aroma of freshly ground coffee immediately enveloped her, mixed with the sweet smell of cakes in the display case. The exposed brick walls remained the same, decorated with black and white photographs of Paris. The same jazz music played softly in the background. Even the corner table, their table, was still there, near the window overlooking the street, and Nicholas was already seated at it. He stood up as soon as he saw her, and Penelope noticed he had taken off his lab coat. He wore a navy blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing tanned, strong forearms. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had repeatedly run his hands through it, a nervous habit she knew well. "You came," he said, and there was genuine surprise in his voice, as if part of him believed she wouldn't show up. "I said I would," Penelope replied, walking to the table. She sat in the opposite chair, placing her purse in her lap as if it were a shield. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Nicholas fidgeted with the coffee cup in front of him, his fingers lightly drumming on the ceramic. Penelope looked out the window, watching people passing on the sidewalk, anything to avoid having to face him directly. "Would you like to order something?" he asked, finally breaking the silence. "No," she continued, looking outside. "I won't be staying long." He nodded, biting his lower lip, another familiar gesture that made Penelope's stomach flip. "I understand." He took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep waters. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know if you would accept." "Neither did I," she admitted, finally looking at him. "But you said you wanted to talk. So, talk." Nicholas rubbed his face with his hands, and when he lowered them, Penelope saw the exhaustion marked in his features. There were subtle dark circles under his eyes, lines of tension around his mouth. He looked like a man carrying the weight of years of regret. "I don't know where to start," he confessed. "How about at the beginning?" Penelope suggested, her voice cold. "With the part where you disappeared 3 days before our wedding without giving a single explanation." He flinched, as if the words were physical blows. "I deserve that." "You deserve much more than that," she retorted, feeling the old anger rise to the surface. "You left me alone, Nicholas. Left me to deal with the guests, with the questions, with the humiliation. Left me to explain to everyone that the groom had simply vanished." "I know." His voice was heavy with remorse. "I know, and there's no excuse for what I did. But I had a reason." "Oh, did you?" Penelope crossed her arms, disbelief clear in her tone. "And what reason would that be? Because at the time you didn't bother to share." Nicholas took his phone from his pocket, unlocked the screen, and tapped on a few things before turning it toward her. "These photos came to me 2 days before the wedding, from an unknown number." Penelope took the phone with trembling hands and looked at the screen. What she saw made her blood run cold. They were photos of her, with a man, embracing in front of a restaurant, laughing together, his hand on her shoulder. Another shot showing the two of them entering a hotel, one more with them sitting too close on a park bench, their heads leaning toward each other, in a pose that seemed intimate. Penelope could barely process what she was seeing. "You thought I was cheating on you? What else was I supposed to think?" His voice came out strangled. 2 days before our wedding, I received these photos with a message saying, "She's deceiving you." I was destroyed, Penelope. Completely destroyed. She zoomed in on one of the photos, studying the man's face, and then, like lightning, the memory came. "Nicholas," she said slowly, still looking at the screen. "This man." "I know who he is now," Nicholas interrupted her, his voice choked. "After I disappeared, after everything fell apart, I investigated. I hired a private investigator because I needed to know the truth. And I discovered he's your cousin, Marco, the cousin you hadn't seen in years who was visiting the city." Penelope felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall. He had just separated. He was going through a difficult time, and I was trying to help him. We were looking for apartments for him to rent, Nicholas, that's all it was. It was just family helping family. "I know." The words came out as a broken whisper. "I know that now. But at the time," he shook his head, his eyes red. "At the time, all I saw was the woman I loved more than my own life apparently cheating on me days before we were to be married. And I panicked. I was so afraid of being humiliated, of being wrong about us, that I simply ran." "You should have come to me," Penelope said, and now the tears were flowing freely down her face. "You should have shown me these photos and given me the chance to explain. But you didn't trust me, Nicholas. You chose to believe anonymous photos instead of believing in 5 years of relationship." "I know." He extended his hand across the table, but stopped halfway, as if uncertain if he had permission to touch her. "And not a day goes by that I don't regret it. Not an hour passes that I don't wish I could go back in time and do things differently." Penelope wiped the tears with the back of her hand, her chest tight with a mixture of anger and pain. "You destroyed me, you know. For months I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't eat. Kept wondering what I had done wrong, why I wasn't enough, why you abandoned me like that. You were always enough, Nicholas said vehemently, finally taking her hand. This time she didn't pull away. You were always more than enough. The mistake was mine. All mine. I was a coward who let fear destroy the best thing that ever happened in my life. They remained like that, hands intertwined on the coffee-stained table, tears streaming down both their faces, while years of hurt and misunderstandings finally came to the surface. "Who sent the photos?" Penelope asked after a long moment. "I never found out," Nicholas admitted. "The number was disposable, but whoever it was, they got exactly what they wanted. They separated us." Penelope pulled her hand back, needing space to process all of this. Her world had been turned upside down twice in a single day, first by the unexpected reunion, and now by the truth that was finally being revealed. "Why didn't you try to find me afterward?" she needed to know. "After you discovered the truth. Why didn't you come after me?" Nicholas let out a bitter laugh. "I tried, God knows I tried. But you had changed your number, changed your address, and when I finally managed to find you through a mutual friend, almost a year had passed. I thought you had moved on, that you had forgotten me, and I thought it would be selfish of me to reappear in your life just to ease my own conscience. So you simply gave up." "I thought it was best for you," he said quietly. "I thought you deserved someone better, someone who wasn't coward enough to run instead of fight." Penelope shook her head, a mixture of emotions tumbling inside her. Part of her wanted to scream at him, beat on his chest, make him feel a fraction of the pain she felt. But another part, a dangerous, treacherous part, just wanted to throw herself into his arms and pretend the last 5 years never happened. "Are you with someone?" The question came out before she could stop herself. His eyes widened slightly with surprise. "No, no one serious. I've dated a few people over the years, but..." He paused, searching for the right words. "No one was ever you." Penelope's heart skipped a beat. "Nicholas, what about you?" He interrupted her, his voice tense with an emotion she couldn't decipher. "Is there someone in your life?" She could lie. She could say yes, that there was someone, that she had moved on and was happy. She could erect that barrier between them and protect her heart from another inevitable break. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was the truth. "No," she whispered, "there's no one." Something changed in the air between them. The tension that was already palpable intensified, transforming into something hotter, more dangerous. Nicholas looked at her as if he were seeing the sun rise after years of darkness. "Penelope," he began, his voice husky, "I know I have no right to ask this. I know I've caused too much pain already, but..." He took a deep breath, gathering courage. Could we try again? Start from scratch. Let me get to know you again. Let you get to know me. No pressure, no expectations. Just the two of us trying to figure out if there's still something here." Penelope should say no. Every rational part of her being screamed to refuse, to protect herself, to not give him the power to destroy her again. But when she looked into his eyes and saw the raw vulnerability there, when she felt her own heart racing just from being near him, when she remembered what it had been like to love him, "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said honestly. "I know." He nodded. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of that trust, if you'll give me the chance." Penelope closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. When she opened them again, she saw him waiting, hopeful, terrified, completely vulnerable. And against all common sense, against all logic, she heard herself say, "All right, one chance. But slowly, Nicholas. Very slowly." The smile that lit up his face was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. And Penelope knew in that exact moment that she was in dangerous territory. Because the truth was that she had never stopped loving him. And that was the scariest thing of all. The days following the meeting at the cafe were strange and uncomfortable in a way Penelope hadn't expected. Not because things were bad, on the contrary. It was precisely because they were too good that it scared her. Nicholas had started sending messages. Nothing excessive, nothing that invaded her space. Just small texts throughout the day. "Hope you're having a good day," or "saw this and thought of you," accompanied by a photo of an orange sunset. Simple messages, but ones that made her heart tighten every time his name appeared on the screen. She responded. With caution, with short phrases, but she responded, and each response felt like a small step toward a precipice that she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. On Thursday, 3 days after the conversation that changed everything, he called. Penelope was at home, curled up on the sofa with a blanket over her legs, watching a movie she was barely paying attention to. When her phone vibrated in her hand and Nicholas's name lit up the screen, her stomach knotted. She let it ring twice before answering, trying to calm her breathing. "Hello? Hi." His voice came from the other end of the line, warm and familiar. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "You're not." Penelope paused the movie, sitting up straighter. "What happened?" "Nothing." He hesitated. I just wanted to hear your voice." Something inside her melted at those simple words. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel, really feel, what that stirred in her. "Nicholas." I know, he said quickly. Slowly. "I promised, but would you like to go out with me tomorrow? Nothing elaborate. Just a walk. Maybe in the park? Like we used to do." Penelope bit her lip, torn. The part of her that still carried hurt wanted to refuse, wanted to make him wait, wanted to keep him at a safe distance. But the part that had never stopped loving him, the part that had dreamed of him during 5 years of lonely nights, wanted to say yes. "What time?" she asked, and immediately felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She could hear the smile in his voice. 3 in the afternoon. I can pick you up." "No." The response came out too quickly. She cleared her throat. "I'd prefer to meet you there at the main gate." There was a pause, and she knew he had understood. She wasn't ready for him to come back into her life so intimately yet. She wasn't ready to see him at her door, entering her personal space as he used to do. "All right," he agreed softly. "At the main gate, 3 o'clock. I'll be there." When Penelope arrived at the park the following afternoon, the sun was shining brightly in the cloudless sky, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of freshly cut grass and wildflowers. She wore a light cotton dress in pale blue and comfortable sandals, her hair loose falling in natural waves over her shoulders. She had looked at herself in the mirror 3 times before leaving, changed clothes twice, and almost completely gave up at least once. Nicholas was already waiting, leaning against the park's iron gate. He wore dark jeans and a simple white t-shirt that accentuated his broad shoulders and tanned skin. Sunglasses hid his eyes, but when he saw her approaching, he immediately removed them, and the smile that lit up his face was so genuine that it made her heart stumble. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice, as if part of him still doubted. "I said I would." Penelope repeated the same words from the cafe. "I know, but..." He stuck his hands in his pockets, a nervous gesture. "Thank you for giving me this chance." They began walking side by side along the gravel path that wound through the park. Around them, life was happening. Children running and laughing, couples lying on the grass, dogs chasing frisbees, the distant sound of music coming from some street vendor. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. They just walked, absorbing each other's presence, relearning the rhythm of their synchronized steps. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" Nicholas finally asked, pointing to a bench under a cherry tree. "It was there. Our 3rd date." Penelope looked at the bench, and the memory came back full force. "You had bought ice cream, but you were so nervous that you dropped it on the ground before you could even give it to me." He laughed, and the sound was so familiar that it made something inside her ache. "And you were so kind about it. You laughed with me instead of at me. That's when I knew it was different with you." "Different how?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Different because I could be myself, awkward, nervous, imperfect, and you didn't care." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You made me want to be better, but you accepted me exactly as I was." Penelope felt the familiar tightness in her throat. "Then why didn't you trust in that? Why did you let some anonymous photos destroy everything we built?" The question had come out harsher than she intended, but it hung there between them like a dark cloud. Nicholas let out a heavy sigh. "Because I was an insecure idiot who let his past sabotage his future." He started walking again, and she followed. "Did you know my parents divorced when I was 15? Penelope nodded. You told me. Your mother had cheated on your father. Yes. His voice became tense, and I saw what it did to him. I saw a man who had always been strong, confident, completely shattered. He was never the same after that, never trusted anyone again, never allowed himself to love completely. He stopped in front of a small lake, watching ducks glide across the water. When I received those photos, it wasn't just about you or about us. It was about all the fear I'd carried since I was 15, the fear of ending up like my father, broken and betrayed. Penelope felt the anger beginning to dissolve, replaced by something more complex. Compassion, perhaps, or understanding. You should have told me about these fears. I know. He turned to her, his eyes shining with unshed emotion. But at the time, I thought admitting these insecurities would make me seem weak. I thought I needed to be strong, confident, perfect. And when everything fell apart, when I saw those photos, all the strength I was pretending to have just evaporated. She reached out, touching his arm lightly. It was a small gesture, but meaningful. Nicholas, nobody expects you to be perfect. I never expected that. I know that now. He covered her hand with his, their fingers intertwining naturally. It took 5 years and a lot of therapy for me to understand that vulnerability isn't weakness, that asking for help isn't failure, that trusting someone means risking being hurt, but that it's worth taking that risk. They remained like that for a moment, holding hands by the edge of the lake, the sun bathing everything in golden tones. And for the first time since they'd reunited, Penelope felt something beyond hurt and confusion. She felt hope. You did therapy? She asked softly. 2 years. He nodded. After I discovered the truth about the photos, after I realized what I had thrown away, I completely fell apart. I couldn't work, couldn't sleep. It was my brother who dragged me to a therapist, and honestly, it was the best thing I've ever done for myself. Penelope squeezed his hand. I did too. Therapy, I mean. For almost a year after everything ended. I'm sorry, he whispered, and there was raw pain in his voice. I'm sorry for putting you in that position, for hurting you so much that you needed professional help to recover. It wasn't just you. She was honest. It was also about me, about realizing that I had placed all my identity in being your fiancé, in planning our future together. When that disappeared, I didn't know who I was without you. Therapy helped me find myself again, to be Penelope, not just Nicholas's fiancé. He studied her for a long moment, admiration evident in his eyes. You're stronger now. I can see that. There's a solidity in you that wasn't there before. And you're more vulnerable, she observed. More open, more real. Maybe we needed these changes, Nicholas suggested cautiously. Maybe we needed to break in order to rebuild better. Penelope didn't answer immediately. Instead, she started walking again, and he accompanied her, still holding hands. They passed a group of children playing in the playground, an elderly couple sitting on a bench feeding pigeons, a street musician playing guitar. There's something I need to know, she finally said, stopping under the shade of an old oak tree. If we're going to try this again, if I let you back into my life, I need to know, are you going to run away again the first time things get difficult? Nicholas positioned himself in front of her, holding both her hands. No, I promise I won't. Because I learned the hard way that running only makes things worse. That courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and facing it anyway. He brought her hands to his lips, softly kissing her knuckles. If you give me this chance, I'll fight for us, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Penelope felt tears burning her eyes. What if I can't fully trust you? What if there's always a part of me afraid that you'll leave again? Then we'll work on that together, he said simply, step by step, day by day. I'm not asking for blind trust, Penelope. I'm asking for the chance to earn back your trust. Let me prove that I'm worthy of it. She studied him, really studied him. She saw the lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She saw the raw sincerity in his gaze. She saw the man he had become, not just the boy who had fallen in love with her years ago. All right, she whispered, but at my pace. When I need space, you need to respect that. Always, he promised. And then, slowly, so slowly that she could have stopped at any moment, Nicholas leaned in. He gave her time to back away, to refuse, to establish that boundary. But she didn't back away. When his lips touched her forehead in a soft, chaste kiss, it was like coming home after a long journey. It wasn't the passionate kiss they used to share. It was something deeper, a recognition, a promise, a new beginning. When he pulled away, both their eyes were moist. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me this chance. I won't waste it." Penelope nodded, unable to speak with the knot of emotions in her throat. As they continued walking through the park, she realized that something had changed. The anger was beginning to dissolve, replaced by something softer, more dangerous. Hope. And with hope came fear. Because this time, if he broke her again, she wasn't sure she could put herself back together. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance between caution and desire. Nicholas and Penelope saw each other regularly. Walks in the park, quick coffees after his work, casual dinners in quiet restaurants where they could talk without interruptions. Each meeting was like peeling layers of an onion, revealing more of what they had become in the 5 years apart. Penelope discovered that Nicholas had adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Max that he had rescued from a shelter. She learned that he had started playing guitar in his spare time, a way to deal with stress. She discovered that he volunteered at a free clinic on Saturdays, treating people who couldn't afford medical care. Nicholas discovered that Penelope had gone back to college and completed the master's degree in literature she had always dreamed of pursuing. He learned that she had started writing, short stories she published on an anonymous blog. He discovered that she had learned to cook complex Italian dishes, something she did when she needed to calm her mind. They rediscovered each other, piece by piece, and with each revelation, the attraction between them grew, not just physical, but emotional. A deep connection that went beyond nostalgia, beyond the memory of what they had been. It was about who they were now. It was a sunny Saturday when Nicholas suggested something different. "Let's have a picnic," he said on the phone, his voice excited. "Like the one we had on our 1-year anniversary, do you remember?" Penelope smiled, lying on her bed with the phone pressed against her ear. "Of course I remember. You forgot the utensils, and we ended up eating everything with our hands." He laughed, and the sound warmed something inside her. "This time I promise not to forget anything. How about tomorrow? Same place. That field near the lake." "All right," she agreed, and realized there was no hesitation in her voice. There was no longer the constant fear she had carried in the first weeks. She was beginning to trust again. Slowly, but she was. Sunday dawned perfect. The sky was crystal blue, without a single cloud, and the sun shone with a golden intensity that made everything seem painted. Penelope chose a light yellow dress, flowing and light, that danced around her thighs when she walked. She left her hair loose, just pinning a small strand with a clip. She applied a soft floral perfume, lavender and jasmine, and looked at herself in the mirror. There was a sparkle in her eyes that she hadn't seen in years, a lightness in her face, and for the first time since everything fell apart, she felt beautiful, not from external validation, but because she was genuinely happy. Nicholas was waiting when she arrived at the field. He had spread a large checkered blanket on the grass, and around it were baskets of food, a bottle of white wine in a bucket with ice, colorful pillows, and even small battery-powered lanterns he clearly planned to light when the sun set. He wore a beige linen shirt with rolled-up sleeves and khaki shorts, his feet bare on the blanket. When he saw Penelope approaching, he stood up, and the smile that lit up his face was so genuine, so full of pure joy, that it made her heart do a somersault. "You look beautiful," he said when she stopped in front of him. "You don't look so bad yourself," she teased, but felt the heat rise to her cheeks. They sat on the blanket, and Nicholas began taking things out of the baskets. There were cheeses, fresh fruits, artisan breads, olives, small triangular sandwiches, imported chocolates, and even the chocolate-covered strawberries she loved. "You remembered everything," Penelope said, touched by the attention to detail. "I remember everything about you," Nicholas replied softly, pouring wine into 2 glasses. "I always have." They ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the company. They talked about everything and nothing, about a movie she had watched, about a particularly difficult patient he had treated, about plans for the future, about dreams they still wanted to fulfill. And as they talked, their bodies naturally moved closer. First, their knees touched. Then Nicholas extended his arm behind her, not touching her directly, but creating a space that was clearly an invitation. Penelope leaned back slightly, allowing his shoulder to support some of her weight. It was intimate without being invasive, comfortable without being presumptuous. After eating, they lay side by side on the blanket, looking at the endless blue sky above. White, fluffy clouds passed slowly, forming shapes they tried to identify. "That one looks like an elephant," Penelope pointed. "Or a very fat dog," Nicholas suggested, and she laughed. He turned his head to look at her, and Penelope felt the weight of that gaze. She turned as well, and suddenly they were face to face, only a few inches separating them. "Can I ask you something?" Nicholas whispered. "Of course. Are you happy?" He searched her eyes. "Now, in this moment, are you happy?" Penelope didn't answer immediately. She considered the question seriously, diving deep into her own feelings, and then, surprising herself, she realized the truth. "Yes," she whispered back. "I am." His smile was dazzling. "Me too. For the first time in 5 years, I'm genuinely happy." They remained like that, gazes intertwined, breathing in sync. And then, slowly, Nicholas raised his hand and brushed away a strand of hair that had fallen across her face, tucking it behind her ear. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. But when his fingers brushed the sensitive skin behind her ear, trailing lightly along her jawline, Penelope felt a shiver run through her entire body. Her breath caught, her lips parted slightly, and she saw his pupils dilate. "Penelope," he murmured, his voice husky. "May I—" "Yes," she interrupted before he could finish the question. Because she knew what he was going to ask, and the answer was yes. It had always been yes, from the first moment she saw him again in the exam room. Nicholas leaned in, closing the space between them millimeter by millimeter. He gave her time to change her mind, to pull back, to set the boundary, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in too, meeting him halfway. When their lips touched, it was as if the whole world stopped spinning. The kiss started soft, almost chaste, lips just brushing, exploring, remembering. But then Nicholas's hand slid to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, and the kiss deepened. Penelope placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating rapidly under her palm, and parted her lips, inviting him for more. He accepted the invitation. The kiss became more intense, more urgent. Years of longing, of regret, of repressed desire exploded between them. Their tongues met, danced, explored. Nicholas pulled her closer, until there was no space between their bodies, until she was practically lying on top of him. Penelope could feel every muscle of his tensed beneath her, could feel the heat emanating from his body, could hear the small sounds he made in the back of his throat. Her hands wandered across his chest, feeling the firm muscles up to his shoulders, down his back. Nicholas moaned softly against her lips, and the sound sent a wave of heat through her body. He rolled, putting her on her back on the blanket, partially covering her body with his. But even in his urgency, he was careful, one hand supporting her head, the other braced on the blanket to avoid putting his full weight on her. They kissed until they were breathless, until their lips were swollen, until the world around them completely disappeared. When they finally separated, both were panting, faces flushed, eyes shining with desire. "Wow," Penelope whispered. "Yeah," Nicholas agreed, his voice hoarse. He rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, trying to regain control. "I forgot what it was like. Kissing you." "I didn't forget," she admitted softly. "Not for a single day." He opened his eyes, and what she saw there left her breathless. It wasn't just desire, though there was plenty of that. It was love, deep, unconditional, eternal. "I love you," he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "I know it's too soon to say that. I know we promised to go slow, but I can't hold it in anymore. I love you, Penelope. I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second in these 5 years." Tears filled her eyes. She raised her hand, touching his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw, the arc of the lips she had just kissed. "Nicholas." Her voice trembled. You don't have to say it back," he interrupted quickly. "I'm not expecting that. I just needed you to know." "I needed to be honest." But Penelope shook her head. "Let me finish." She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I love you too. I tried not to love you, tried to forget, tried to move on, but I couldn't. You were always here." She placed his hand over her heart. Always. The kiss that followed was different from the previous one. It was softer, deeper, loaded with the promise of second chances and possible futures. It was a kiss that said everything words couldn't express. When they finally separated again, Nicholas pulled her into his arms, and they remained lying on the blanket, bodies intertwined, watching the clouds pass as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. "I won't mess things up this time," Nicholas promised, kissing the top of her head. "I know," Penelope replied, believing. And for the first time in 5 years, the future didn't seem frightening. It seemed promising. The weeks following the picnic were like living in a dream that Penelope was afraid to wake from. She and Nicholas saw each other almost every day, intimate dinners in cozy restaurants, long phone conversations that stretched into the early hours, messages exchanged throughout the day that made her heart race every time she saw his name on the screen. But something had changed since that kiss in the field. A new electrifying tension hung between them, a constant awareness of each other's bodies, a growing desire that became harder to ignore with each accidental touch, each lingering glance, each moment when they were too close to be just friends, but not close enough to be lovers. Penelope could feel Nicholas's restraint. She saw it in the way he hesitated before touching her, as if silently asking permission. She saw it in how his eyes lingered on her lips when they talked, but he always looked away before it lasted too long. She saw it in how he maintained a respectful distance, even when every line of his body leaned toward her, like a plant seeking the sun. He was being a gentleman. He was keeping his promise to go slowly, to respect her pace. But Penelope was beginning to realize that maybe she didn't want to go slowly anymore. It was a Thursday evening when everything changed. Nicholas had invited Penelope to dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with dim lights, candles on the tables, and soft jazz music playing in the background. They ate homemade pasta and drank red wine, talking about everything and nothing, laughing at inside jokes that only they understood. When the bill came, Nicholas insisted on paying, and Penelope didn't argue. There was something different about him tonight, a contained energy, an intensity in his eyes that made her stomach flip with anticipation. "Let me take you home," he offered when they left the restaurant. The night was warm, the humid air carrying the scent of jasmine from the trees lining the street. "All right," Penelope agreed, and when he offered his arm, she accepted it, intertwining hers with his. They walked to where he had parked the car, but neither was in a hurry. They walked slowly, savoring the night, the closeness, the feeling of simply being together. When they reached his car, Nicholas opened the passenger door for her, always the gentleman. The trip to Penelope's house was short, just 15 minutes, but each minute was charged with a growing tension, thick and palpable. Nicholas's hand rested on the gear shift, and when he changed gears, his fingers accidentally brushed against her knee. Each touch was like a spark of electricity. When they finally stopped in front of her building, neither moved immediately. The engine remained running, the soft sound of the radio filling the silence. "Thank you for dinner," Penelope finally said, turning to look at him. "It was perfect." "The pleasure was mine," Nicholas replied. But he didn't look away. His eyes were fixed on hers, dark and intense in the dimness of the car. More silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, pregnant with unspoken possibilities. "I should go," Penelope murmured, but didn't move. "Yes," Nicholas agreed, but he also made no move to get out of the car or let her go. "Nicholas," her voice came out as a whisper. "Yes? Would you like to come up for coffee?" The words rushed out before she could regret them. She saw the struggle play out on his face, the part of him that wanted to respect the pace they had established against the part that clearly wanted to say yes more than anything in the world. "Are you sure?" he asked cautiously. "Because if I come up, Penelope, if I enter your home..." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. They both knew what was implied. "I'm sure," she said, and it was true. She was more certain of this than she had been of anything in a long time. Nicholas turned off the engine. The walk to her third-floor apartment seemed to last both an eternity and a second at the same time. Their fingers touched in the elevator, then intertwined, their palms warm and slightly sweaty. The tension between them was almost visible, vibrating in the small, enclosed air. When they reached her door, Penelope's hands were shaking so much she almost dropped the keys. Nicholas gently took them, unlocking the door for her. But when the door opened, he hesitated at the entrance. "Last chance to change your mind," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. No resentment, no judgment. "If you're not ready—" Penelope interrupted him by pulling him inside and closing the door. The second the door closed, she pressed him against it, her hands moving up to the back of his neck, pulling him down. "Shut up and kiss me," she ordered. He obeyed. The kiss was explosive from the first contact. None of the gentleness and cautious exploration of their previous kisses. This was hungry, desperate. Years of repressed desire finally released. Nicholas's hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her face, down her back, pulling her against him until there was no space between their bodies. Penelope responded with equal fervor, her hands exploring the tense muscles of his back through his shirt, lightly scratching, making him moan against her lips. She could feel every inch of him pressed against her, could feel how much he wanted her, and it set her on fire. Nicholas turned her, pressing her against the door, his body completely covering hers. He kissed the corner of her mouth, moving down her jawline, finding the sensitive spot just below her ear that he knew, still knew even after all these years, made her tremble. "Penelope," he groaned against her skin, his voice husky and heavy with desire. "God, how I've missed you." "Me too," she gasped, her head tilted back, giving him better access to her neck. "Don't stop. Please don't stop." "I won't," he promised, his hands sliding down, finding the curve of her waist, the curve of her hips. Never again. He kissed her again, deeply, completely, as if he were trying to memorize her through touch. And then, without breaking the kiss, he lifted her up. Penelope automatically wrapped her legs around his waist and he carried her through the dark apartment. "Bedroom," she whispered against his lips, and he changed direction, stumbling slightly on a coffee table, making them both laugh. But the laughter died when he laid her on the bed, covering her body with his. The moon came through the window, bathing everything in soft silver, and when their eyes met in the dark, there was something sacred in the moment. "I love you," Nicholas whispered, brushing the hair from her face. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Penelope replied, pulling him down, capturing his lips again. His hands found the hem of her dress, fingers sliding underneath, touching the bare skin of her thigh. She arched against him, her hands going to the buttons of his shirt, unbuttoning them one by one with trembling fingers. When the shirt finally fell away, revealing his broad, tanned chest, marked with defined muscles, Penelope ran her hands over him reverently. There were small scars that weren't there before, marks of the years they spent apart, evidence of a life lived without her. She traced each one with her fingers, then with her lips, kissing each mark, each inch of skin. Nicholas closed his eyes, his breath coming in irregular bursts. "Penelope, let me love you," she whispered against his skin. "Let me show you how much I love you." And then, slowly, exploring every inch of each other as if it were the first time, but with the familiarity of lovers who know each other deeply, they gave themselves to each other. It wasn't just sex. It was reconnection. It was healing. It was promise. It was love in its purest and most vulnerable form. And when they finally joined, when their bodies became one, when each movement was perfectly synchronized like a dance whose steps they had never forgotten, both knew there was no turning back. They belonged to each other. They always had, and they always would. Hours later, they remained intertwined in the rumpled sheets, sweat cooling on their skin, breaths finally calming. Penelope's head rested on Nicholas's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare back, moving up and down her spine in a hypnotic rhythm. "Stay," she whispered in the dark. "Don't leave tonight." "I'm not going anywhere," Nicholas promised, kissing the top of her head. "I'm never leaving again." And Penelope believed him, because this time she could feel the difference. This time, it was forever. Morning light filtered through the half-closed curtains, casting golden stripes across the bedroom. Penelope awoke slowly, her body soft and relaxed in a way she hadn't felt in years. It took a few seconds to orient herself, to remember where she was, what had happened, why she felt so complete. And then she felt the heavy arm around her waist, pulling her against a broad, warm chest. She felt the soft breathing against her neck, the familiar scent of Nicholas enveloping her like a blanket. She smiled. Nicholas was still sleeping deeply, his face relaxed in a way she rarely saw when he was awake. In sleep, he looked younger, vulnerable, all the lines of worry and tension softened. Penelope turned carefully in his arms, not wanting to wake him, just wanting to look. God, how she had missed this, waking up beside him, seeing him this way, unguarded, confident enough to lower all defenses, knowing he was hers, at least for this moment. As if sensing her gaze, Nicholas stirred. His eyes opened slowly, still hazy with sleep, but when they focused on her, a slow, lazy smile spread across his face. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. "Good morning," Penelope replied softly. They stayed like that for long minutes, just looking at each other, fingers tracing lazy patterns on each other's skin. There was no rush, no discomfort, just the peaceful awareness that something fundamental had changed between them the night before. "Are you okay?" Nicholas finally asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "More than okay," she assured him, kissing him lightly. "And you?" "Perfect." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "Absolutely perfect." Penelope's stomach growled loudly, breaking the romantic moment. She laughed, embarrassed, but Nicholas just smiled wider. "Someone's hungry," he teased. "Well, we used a lot of energy last night," she countered with a mischievous smile. He groaned, his eyes darkening. "Don't talk like that if you don't want to start all over again." "Who says I don't want to?" Penelope challenged, but then her stomach growled again, even louder this time. "But maybe food first." Nicholas laughed, kissing her one last time before getting out of bed. Penelope enjoyed the view, his naked body bathed in morning light, muscles moving under tanned skin as he stretched. He picked up his underwear from the floor, putting it on before turning to her with a raised eyebrow. "Enjoying the view?" "Very much," she admitted without shame. He laughed, tossing her shirt in her direction. "Put this on. I'll make breakfast." "You don't even know where anything is in my kitchen," Penelope pointed out, putting on his shirt instead of her own. It was too big, falling to mid-thigh, and smelled like him. "Then it will be an adventure," Nicholas replied with a smile, leaving the room. Penelope found him in the kitchen a few minutes later, still wearing just his shirt. He was standing in front of the stove, shirtless, wearing only yesterday's jeans, trying to figure out how to work her Italian coffee maker. "Need help?" she offered, leaning against the doorframe. He turned, and the look he gave her, full of heat and desire, made her pulse quicken. His eyes traveled slowly over her body, lingering on how the shirt revealed her bare legs, how the thin fabric didn't hide much. "You're wearing my shirt," he observed, his voice husky. "I am." She took a step toward him. "Do you mind?" "On the contrary." He abandoned the coffee maker, advancing toward her in 3 long strides. His hands went to her waist, pulling her against him. "You've never looked more beautiful." He kissed her deeply, completely, and Penelope melted against him. Her hands moved up his bare chest, feeling the muscles tense under her fingers. The kiss deepened, intensified, and suddenly she was being lifted, seated on the kitchen counter, her legs automatically parting so he could stand between them. "Penelope." He groaned against her lips, his hands sliding under the shirt, touching bare skin. "You're killing me." "Then kill me slowly," she whispered, lightly biting his lower lip. What began as a simple breakfast turned into something completely different. Nicholas loved her right there, on the kitchen counter, with sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of unmade coffee in the air. It was quick and urgent, full of need and desire that neither could contain. Afterward, breathless and satisfied, they finally managed to make coffee. though Penelope had to take over when it became clear that Nicholas had no idea how to use an Italian mocha pot. They drank coffee sitting on the small living room sofa, bodies intertwined, sharing toast with jam and talking about nothing in particular. It was domestic, intimate, perfect, in a simple and profound way. "I need to go home at some point," Nicholas said reluctantly, looking at the clock. "Get clean clothes. Feed Max." "Max?" Penelope sat up straight. "Poor thing, he must be going crazy." "He'll survive," Nicholas laughed. "But yes, I need to stop by there. Would you like to come with me?" There was vulnerability in the question. He was inviting her into his space, opening another part of his life to her. "I'd love to," Penelope replied, and his smile was radiant. Nicholas's house was a charming two-story in a quiet neighborhood, red brick with white shutters and a small but well-maintained garden in front. When they entered, they were immediately attacked by 60 pounds of excited golden retriever. "Max, sit," Nicholas ordered, laughing, but the dog was too happy to obey, jumping and barking joyfully. Penelope knelt down, letting Max lick and smell her, stroking the golden fur. "Hi, handsome. Nice to meet you." Max barked in approval, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. "He likes you," Nicholas observed, clearly pleased. "Max has good taste." While Nicholas went upstairs to change clothes, Penelope explored the living room. There were photos on the walls. Nicholas with friends, with his brother, with Max. Medical books stacked on the coffee table next to detective novels. A guitar leaning in the corner. It was cozy, lived in, real. And then she saw something that made her heart stop. On the shelf above the fireplace, in a simple wooden frame, was a photo of the two of them. It was old, taken years ago before everything fell apart. They were at the beach, she in his arms, both laughing at the camera, completely in love. He had kept the photo. During all these years, through all the pain and separation, he had kept that photo in a prominent place in his home. "I could never take it down," Nicholas's voice came from behind her. She turned and found him standing at the bottom of the stairs, now wearing clean jeans and a grey t-shirt. There was vulnerability in his eyes. "I know I probably should have removed it, moved on, but I couldn't. You were the best part of my life, Penelope. Even when you weren't with me anymore, even when I thought I had lost you forever, I couldn't erase you completely." Tears filled her eyes. "Nicholas." He came down the steps, moving closer. "I know we're still rebuilding. I know there's still so much to work through, so much trust to regain. But I want you to know that I never stopped. I never stopped loving you, wanting you, hoping that maybe, someday, I'd get a second chance." Penelope threw herself into his arms, burying her face in his neck. "You have that chance, you always had it." They held each other like that for long minutes, Max circling around them, confused but happy with the emotion in the air. When they finally separated, Nicholas wiped the tears from her face with his thumbs. "Stay today. Spend the day with me. We can take Max for a walk, do something normal, just be together." "Yes," Penelope agreed immediately. "I'd love that." And so they did. They spent the entire Sunday together, walked Max in the park, had lunch at a small cafe, returned to his house where they cooked together while Max slept at their feet. They talked, laughed, kissed, made love again, this time slowly, exploring, savoring each moment. When night fell and Penelope finally returned to her apartment, she knew with absolute certainty she wasn't just falling in love with Nicholas again. She had already fallen, completely, irrevocably, and this time it was forever. The months that followed were the happiest of Penelope's life since the last time she was with Nicholas. But there was a fundamental difference now. They were no longer the same young lovers as before. They were people who had suffered, grown, learned from their mistakes, and that made the love between them deeper, more conscious, more real. They established a comfortable routine. Nicholas slept at her apartment 3 or 4 times a week, and she spent weekends at his house with Max. They cooked together, watched movies curled up on the sofa, took morning walks before work. These were simple domestic things, but loaded with meaning. Each moment together was a silent affirmation. This time, it will work. This time, we are stronger. It was a Saturday morning when Penelope woke up before Nicholas. The soft dawn light came through his bedroom window, painting everything in pink and gold tones. She watched him sleep for a few minutes, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, one hand resting protectively on her stomach even in sleep. Careful not to wake him, she slid out of bed, putting on one of his t-shirts that had been thrown over a chair. The house was quiet, except for the distant sound of birds outside and Max's nails clicking on the wooden floor as he followed her to the kitchen. "Good morning, handsome," she whispered to the dog, stroking his head. "Want breakfast?" Max wagged his tail enthusiastically, and Penelope filled his bowl with kibble before starting to prepare coffee. She had learned where Nicholas kept everything: the coffee beans in the upper left cabinet, the filters in the drawer next to the stove, the mugs on the shelf above the sink. She knew his house almost as well as her own now. She was putting bread in the toaster when she felt strong arms wrap around her waist from behind. Nicholas pulled her against his chest, burying his face in her neck. "You left the bed," he murmured, his sleep-rough voice vibrating against her skin in a delicious way. "I didn't want to wake you," Penelope replied softly, tilting her head to give him better access. "You were sleeping so deeply. I always sleep better when you're here," he confessed, leaving a trail of soft kisses along her shoulder. "But I wake up better when you're still in my arms." She laughed, turning in his arms. Nicholas was disheveled, his eyes still sleepy, wearing only pajama shorts hanging low on his hips. He was absolutely perfect. "Good morning," she said, running her fingers through his messy hair. "Good morning," he replied, capturing her lips in a slow, deep kiss that curled her toes. When they separated, both were smiling like idiots. "Coffee?" Penelope offered. "Please," Nicholas nodded, but he didn't let her go. Instead, he stayed there, embracing her while she prepared the coffee, occasionally kissing her shoulder or neck, making her laugh when his stubble brushed against her sensitive skin. It was intimate in a way that went beyond the physical. It was partnership. It was home. After breakfast, Nicholas suggested they visit the old cafe, the one they used to go to years ago, where he had apologized and explained everything, where, in a way, everything had begun again. "Are you sure?" Penelope asked, a bit surprised. They had avoided that place since the devastating conversation months ago, as if returning might bring back painful memories. "I am," Nicholas said firmly, taking her hand. "I want to give that place new meaning. I want us, when we think of it, to not only remember the pain. I want to create new memories, good memories." Penelope felt her chest warm. "All right, let's go." The cafe was busier than last time. It was the weekend, and tables were occupied with couples, families, groups of friends laughing loudly. Their table, the one in the corner near the window, was free, as if it had been waiting for them. They sat down, and this time there was no tension, no tears, just the comfortable feeling of being with someone you love in a place that has history. Nicholas ordered his cappuccino with extra cinnamon. Penelope ordered her green tea with honey. Some things never changed. "You know what's funny?" Nicholas said after the waitress brought their drinks. "The last time we were here, I was terrified. I thought you were going to send me away, tell me it was too late, that I had ruined everything beyond repair." "I thought about doing that," Penelope admitted. "Part of me wanted to hurt you, like you hurt me. Wanted to see you suffer." "I deserved it," he agreed without hesitation. "Maybe." She took his hand across the table. "But it's not about deserving or not. It's about choosing love even when it's difficult. Choosing forgiveness even when it hurts. Choosing to try again even when you're afraid of getting hurt." Nicholas intertwined his fingers with hers, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles. "You forgave me more than I deserved. And you love me more than I dreamed possible," she countered softly. "So I guess we're even." They smiled at each other, and in that moment, with the sun coming through the window and bathing everything in golden light, Penelope knew they had reached a place of true healing. The past still existed, the scars were still there, but they no longer defined who they were. They were just part of the journey that had brought them here. "You know what I think?" Nicholas said after a moment. "I think maybe we needed those 5 years apart." Penelope raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Don't get me wrong. I would give anything to have done things differently, to not have hurt you. He quickly clarified. But look at who we've become. You're stronger, more independent, more self-assured. I'm more vulnerable, more open, more able to communicate my fears instead of running from them. He squeezed her hand. Maybe, if we had gotten married back then, we wouldn't have lasted. Maybe we needed to grow separately before we could grow together. Penelope considered his words. There was truth in them, however difficult it was to admit. Maybe you're right, but still, they were 5 lost years. Not lost, Nicholas corrected. Invested. Invested in becoming the people we needed to be to make this work the right way. She smiled, her eyes welling up. When did you get so wise? Therapy, he joked, but there was seriousness behind the humor, and a lot of time thinking about you. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking around the city hand in hand, visiting places they used to frequent. The bookstore where he bought her first gift, the park where they had their first kiss, the bridge where they watched the sunset countless times. Each place was a memory, and now each place gained a new layer, not erasing the past but building upon it. When night fell and they returned to his house, they curled up on the couch with Max at their feet, watching a movie that neither of them was really paying attention to. They were too busy kissing, whispering words of love, touching each other reverently. Penelope? Nicholas said during a particularly unimportant scene in the film. Can I ask you something? Always, she replied, playing with his fingers. Can you imagine a future with me? A real future. Not just dating, but more. Her heart jumped. Like marriage? Yes. He sat up straighter, turning her to look at him directly. Like marriage. Like waking up together every day. Like building a life. Maybe having children someday. Growing old together. Can you see that? With me? Penelope felt tears fill her eyes, but these were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. I can see all of that. I want all of that. With you. The smile that lit up his face was dazzling. He pulled her into a deep kiss, pouring all his love and all his promise into that simple act. When they separated, he held her face between his hands. I'm going to make you happy. Every day for the rest of my life, I'll work to make you happy. You already do, Penelope said, covering his hands with hers. Just by being here, being you, loving me the way you do, you already make me happy. They kissed again, and then they just held each other, listening to the rhythm of each other's hearts, Max snoring softly at their feet, the house quiet and peaceful around them. And for the first time since everything fell apart years ago, Penelope felt no fear of the future. She felt hope, she felt love, she felt peace, and she knew, with every fiber of her being, that this time it was forever. 3 months had passed since that conversation on the sofa, and Penelope's life had transformed into something she had barely dared to dream. She and Nicholas were inseparable now, not in a suffocating, codependent way, but in the healthy way of 2 people who actively chose to be together every day. He had a drawer in her apartment. She had space in his closet. Max treated her like a second owner. Their lives had intertwined so naturally that it was hard to remember what it was like to live alone. But something had been different in the last few weeks. Nicholas was strange. Not in a bad way, but in a noticeable way. He would get nervous for no apparent reason, check his phone constantly as if expecting an important message, and she had caught him several times looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. Is everything okay? She asked one night while they were having dinner at her apartment. Yes, yes, he replied too quickly, looking away. Why? You're acting strange, Penelope observed, tilting her head. Is something worrying you? No, I mean, yes, but it's nothing bad. He smiled, but there was nervousness behind it. Just work. She didn't completely believe him, but decided not to push. If it was something important, he would tell her when he was ready. The following Saturday, Nicholas showed up at her apartment with an unusual proposal. Let's do a puzzle, he suggested, coming in with a large box under his arm. Penelope raised an eyebrow, laughing. A puzzle? Since when do you like puzzles? Since now, he replied, already heading to the dining table and dumping out the pieces. I saw this in the store and thought it would be fun to do together. It was a beautiful image, a painting of a lavender field at sunset, vibrant purples and oranges mingling in the sky. 1,000 pieces, according to the box. This will take hours, Penelope pointed out, but she was already approaching, curious. Exactly, Nicholas said with a smile. Quality time together. They sat across from each other, starting with the edges like all good puzzle assemblers do. They talked as they worked, about her day, about a complicated patient he had treated, about plans for next weekend. It was relaxing, meditative even. Just the two of them, the colorful pieces spread across the table, the soft sound of music playing in the background. Penelope didn't notice when Nicholas became quieter. She didn't realize when he started moving pieces without really trying to fit them. She didn't see when he put his hand in his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly. "Penelope," he said after almost an hour, his voice strangely tense. She was concentrating on finding a specific piece of orange sky. "Look at me." Something in his tone made her raise her head immediately, and what she saw made her heart stop. Nicholas had stood up and was kneeling beside the table. In his hand, he held a small navy blue velvet box. The air left her lungs in a broken sigh. "Nicholas," she could barely form words. He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring, white gold with a solitaire diamond that sparkled under the lamplight. It was elegant, timeless, perfect. "Penelope," he began, and she could see tears shining in his eyes. "When I lost you, I thought I had lost my chance at happiness. I thought I had thrown away the only good thing in my life. I spent 5 years regretting, punishing myself, wishing I could go back in time." Tears were already streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. She just watched him, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. And then, by some miracle I don't deserve, you walked into that exam room, and it was as if the universe was giving me a second chance, not just to have you back, but to do things right this time, to be the man you deserve. His voice trembled, but he continued. "These last months with you have been the best of my life, not because they're easy, though they are, but because they're real, because you know me. You know my flaws, my fears, my scars, and you love me anyway." He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on hers. "You forgave me when I couldn't even forgive myself. You gave me another chance when you had every right to send me away. You taught me that loving isn't just about the perfect moments, it's about choosing to stay in the imperfect ones too." Penelope sobbed, her hands covering her mouth. "I don't want another day without you, Penelope. I don't want to wake up without you by my side. I don't want to build a future if you're not in it. I want to marry you, I want to call you my wife, I want to create a family with you. I want to grow old by your side and argue about which movie to watch on Saturday nights. I want everything. With you. Forever." He held her free hand, squeezing it gently. "So, Penelope Torres, would you do me the honor? The honor I don't deserve but will fight for every day, of marrying me, of letting me spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, making you happy." The silence that followed was charged with pure emotion. Penelope couldn't stop crying, couldn't control the sobs that shook her body. But when she finally managed to speak, the word came out clear and strong. "Yes." Nicholas's eyes widened. "Yes, yes," she repeated, laughing through the tears. "Yes, Nicholas. Yes to all the mornings, all the coffees, all the nights with you. Yes to the perfect and imperfect moments. Yes to building a life together. Yes to everything. Yes, yes, yes." He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and quickly took the ring from the box. His hands were shaking so much he almost dropped it, but he managed to slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Penelope looked at the ring through her tears, the way it caught the light, the way it seemed to have been made specifically for her, and then looked at the man kneeling before her, the man who broke her, the man who loved her, the man who lost her and fought to win her back, the man who would be her husband. She pulled him up into her arms and kissed him with everything she had. The kiss was salty with tears, hers, his, both, but it was perfect. It was promise. It was new beginning. It was forever. When they finally separated, both were laughing and crying at the same time, forehead against forehead, breaths intertwined. "I love you," Nicholas whispered. God, I love you so much. I love you too, Penelope replied, holding his face between her hands. I've always loved you. I always will love you. He lifted her off the floor, spinning her while she laughed, her hands clutching his shoulders. When he set her back down, he kissed her again, softer this time, more reverent. We're getting married, he said, as if he still couldn't believe it. We're getting married, she agreed, smiling so much her face hurt. Max, who had been sleeping on the sofa, came running, barking excitedly as if he knew something important had happened. They laughed, petting the dog who jumped between them, all happy. When? Nicholas asked, pulling her back into his arms. When do you want to get married? I don't know, Penelope admitted, looking at the ring on her finger. But I don't want to wait too long. We've waited long enough. I agree, he said, kissing her forehead. So let's plan soon. Something simple, intimate. Just us and the people we love most. Perfect, she agreed. They went back to the table, but the puzzle was forgotten. Instead, they spent the rest of the night planning their future, where they would like to get married, who to invite, where they would live afterward, how many children they wanted, what names they would give them. They talked until the early hours, intertwined on the sofa, making plans and dreaming together. And when they finally went to bed, Penelope looked at the ring on her finger one last time before turning off the light. It was real. It was happening. She was going to marry Nicholas. And this time, nothing, absolutely nothing, would stop them. 3 months after the proposal, on a clear spring morning where the sky was so blue it seemed painted, Penelope woke up knowing that this was the day that would change everything, the day she would become Nicholas's wife. There was no nervousness like the first time, years ago. There were no doubts, no fears, no sensation of standing on the edge of a precipice. There was only a quiet, deep certainty that permeated every cell of her body. She was making the right choice. The ceremony would be small and intimate, just 20 people in the garden of the house they had just bought together. A modest house but full of light, with a spacious garden where Max ran freely, and enough rooms for the family they dreamed of building. Penelope was in what would soon be their bedroom, the master bedroom overlooking the trees, surrounded by her best friends as she prepared. The dress she chose was simple and elegant, a flowing silk model, ivory white, without much volume, just clean lines that fell perfectly over her body. Her hair was loose in natural waves, with small white flowers interwoven. Light makeup, just enough to highlight her eyes bright with happiness. You look beautiful, Anna, her best friend, said with tears in her eyes. Absolutely stunning. Penelope smiled, looking at herself in the mirror, and for the first time she truly saw herself as a bride, not just in the dress, but in the sparkle of her eyes, in the smile she couldn't contain, in the peace that radiated from within. I'm ready, she said. And it was true. Outside, the garden had been transformed, white chairs arranged in a semicircle around a simple arch decorated with wildflowers, lavender, daisies, white roses. A walkway of rose petals led from the house deck to the arch. Soft guitar music played in the background, performed by Nicholas's brother. And there, under the arch, was he. Nicholas wore a perfectly fitted navy blue suit, no tie, just the white shirt with the top 2 buttons open. He was nervous. She could tell by the way he fidgeted with his hands, by the way he took deep breaths repeatedly. Max sat beside him, well-behaved for once, wearing a bow tie that matched his owner's suit. When the music changed, an instrumental version of 1,000 Years, and Penelope appeared on the deck, Nicholas turned, and the expression on his face made her heart stop. There was love. There was admiration. There were tears freely falling down his cheeks as he watched her walk toward him. He didn't try to hide them, didn't try to wipe them away. He just let them fall, smiling through them, his eyes fixed on her as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Penelope walked alone. She didn't need someone to give her away. She was giving herself by her own choice to the man she loved. Each step was deliberate, conscious, full of meaning. When she finally reached the arch and stood facing Nicholas, he took her hands, squeezing them gently. You are... God, there are no words, he whispered, his voice choked. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So are you. she whispered back, wiping a tear from his face with her thumb. The officiant, a close friend of both, smiled warmly. We are gathered here to celebrate the love between Penelope and Nicholas, a love that was tested, broken, and rebuilt stronger than before. A love that proves that second chances aren't just possible, they are miracles. He continued speaking, but Penelope could barely focus on the words. She was lost in Nicholas's eyes, in the way he looked at her, in the way his thumbs traced soft circles on the backs of her hands. "Nicholas, would you like to say your vows?" the officiant asked. Nicholas nodded, clearing his throat. He hadn't written anything down. He had decided to speak from the heart. "Penelope," he began, his voice trembling but firm. 5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life by letting you go. I hurt you in ways I will never completely forgive myself for. But you had the courage to forgive me. The courage to give me a second chance when I didn't deserve it." He squeezed her hands. "Today, before God and everyone present, I promise I won't waste that chance. I promise to love you on the good days and the difficult ones. I promise to communicate my fears instead of running from them. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, your safe place, and I promise to spend each day trying to be worthy of the love you give me." His voice broke on the last sentence, and he had to stop, breathing deeply to compose himself. "You are my miracle, Penelope, and I will honor that miracle every day of my life." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Even Max seemed moved, lying at their feet with a contented sigh. "Penelope?" The officiant turned to her. She smiled through her own tears. "Nicholas, I could stand here and list all the reasons why I love you. I could talk about your kindness, your intelligence, the way you make me laugh, but the truth is simpler than that." She took a step closer. "I love you because you are human, because you make mistakes and own them, because you grow, learn, evolve. Because even when everything fell apart, even when it took years, you never gave up on us." She squeezed his hands. "Today I promise to be your partner in everything. I promise to love you not despite your imperfections, but including them. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty, communication, and unconditional love. I promise to be your home just as you are mine, and I promise that no matter what the future brings, we will face it together." She smiled, her eyes shining. "You are my home, Nicholas, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life coming home to you every day." Nicholas made a sound between a laugh and a sob, pulling her closer. "The rings?" the officiant requested. Nicholas's brother approached, presenting 2 simple gold bands, elegant, timeless, perfect. Nicholas took her ring first, holding Penelope's left hand. "With this ring, I thee wed." He slid the band onto her finger, just above the engagement ring. "My wife, my love, my life." Penelope took his ring, her hands trembling slightly. "With this ring I thee wed." She slid it onto his finger, and something inside her clicked into place. "My husband, my heart, my forever." The officiant smiled broadly. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Nicholas, you may kiss your bride." Nicholas didn't wait for another word. He pulled Penelope into his arms and kissed her, deeply, completely, pouring years of love, pain, forgiveness, and promise into that single kiss. The guests applauded and cheered. Max barked excitedly, but they barely heard. They were lost in each other, in the moment, in the sacred promise they had just made. When they finally separated, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "Wife," Nicholas whispered, as if testing the word. "Husband," Penelope replied, smiling so much her face hurt. They walked back along the petal pathway, hand in hand, officially married, while everyone around them threw rice and flowers. The reception was intimate and joyful. Tables set up in the garden, homemade food prepared by friends, wine flowing freely, laughter filling the air. Nicholas and Penelope danced their first dance as husband and wife under the fairy lights they had hung in the trees. "We did it," Nicholas whispered in her ear as they slowly turned. "We really did it." "I never doubted," Penelope lied blatantly, and they both laughed. "Liar," he teased, kissing her temple. "But I love you anyway." "Good," she replied, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart. "Because you're stuck with me now forever. There's nowhere I'd rather be," he said sincerely. And as they danced, surrounded by people they loved in the garden of the house that was theirs, Penelope closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the fullness of the moment. She had lost Nicholas once. She had suffered. She had broken. She had rebuilt herself. And then, by some miracle, she had received a second chance, and this time they got it right. This time it was forever. Later, when the guests had left and they were alone on the porch watching the stars, Nicholas pulled Penelope onto his lap. "Ready for our honeymoon?" he asked, kissing her neck. "Born ready," she replied, turning to kiss him. "Then let's go," he said, standing up with her in his arms, making her squeal in surprise and laugh. He carried her through the door, the traditional gesture, and into the house that was theirs. And when the door closed behind them, shutting the world outside, all that remained was love. Pure, unconditional, eternal. The kind of love that survives storms. The kind of love that deserves second chances. The kind of love that lasts forever. And they had a whole lifetime ahead to live it. Penelope and Nicholas proved that true love isn't one that never breaks. It's one that, even when shattered, finds the strength to rebuild itself. They learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting the pain, but choosing love despite it. That second chances aren't given because of merit, but because of courage. And that sometimes the longest path is the only one that leads us exactly where we were always meant to be. They lost 5 years apart, but gained a lifetime together. More mature, stronger, more capable of loving truly. Because in the end, it wasn't fate that brought them back together. It was the daily choice not to give up. And you? Do you believe in second chances, or do you think some loves are meant to happen only once? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member for early access to upcoming stories. And if you truly felt it was worth hearing, click the super thanks button too. Your support makes all the difference and helps us continue bringing stories that move you.